Hello everyone and welcome to the Research School of Chemistry ANU Open Day. My name is Penny Brothers. I'm the Director of the Research School of Chemistry. I'm going to kick off this event by talking to you just for a few minutes about why chemistry is such a central science that is so important to solving some of the big issues that are facing the world. Before I start in on that, I'm just going to talk for a minute about the sculpture that is virtually hanging behind my head. This is a larger-than-life sculpture made by a local artist that hangs in the foyer of the Research School of Chemistry at ANU. And it depicts a long biomolecule, a protein, and the pattern that it folds into. Why I like this sculpture when I'm thinking about chemistry is that I like to think about the relationship between art and science. And that relationship is very close. The kind of imagination and creativity that artists use to create their work is exactly the same kind of imagination and creativity that scientists use when they are looking at the kinds of issues in the world that need work right now. So that interface is very close and very important. I'm sharing my screen now, and this is what I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes. And it's just a vignette of why it's valuable to study chemistry. And I'm going to focus on chemistry and sustainability. I could have focused on many other topics, but I've chosen this one because it's one that's on our mind right now. And it also illustrates nicely some of the reasons why chemistry is such a central science. So this is like a mini lecture, the kind of thing that you might encounter when you study chemistry at the ANU. It has a little bit of chemistry in it, which should be accessible if you've done some chemistry at school. And it just gives you a picture of why many different facets of chemistry are important in our modern world. So these are some of the big questions about energy and about sustainability. So the kinds of questions that we can ask is how much energy do we consume globally? How much energy can sunlight provide if we were to use that as a sustainable source of energy? Could it realistically meet all our needs? What are the challenges to harnessing and storing this energy, and can we do it in a sustainable way? And this is the most important question in the context of this discussion today. Why is chemistry critical to answering these questions? If we consider the world's current energy consumption, it's currently around 14 terawatts. A terawatt is 10 to the power of 12 watts. Now, out of that huge amount of energy, and we'll come into a minute in thinking about what that huge amount of energy actually means, we get about 87% of that total world energy consumption from fossil fuels, and we know that that's not sustainable. If we were to use nuclear power, for example, to provide all of the energy required by the world, we'd need 14,000 nuclear power plants, and currently we've got less than 500 worldwide. So something that, like nuclear, is not going to be able to solve our problems. And there's a big question about whether oil can be used sustainably, and I think really the answer to that is no. If we just think for a minute about what this 10 to the 12 watts of energy consumption really means, if we just need to think about what a watt is. So a watt is a unit of power, and what that does is it measures the rate of energy produced or consumed. So 1 watt equals 1 joule of energy produced or consumed per second. Now, just to get our head into the right space for understanding the scale of things, something that is 5 milliwatts, remember milli means divide by 1,000, so a 5 milliwatt laser pointer is something that we might be familiar with. Those are those little handheld laser pointers that are typically green or red. If we go up by a few powers of 10 to 5 watts, a little LED lamp, excuse me, the kind that glow on all our electronic devices these days is 5 watts. Jumping up in power again, a 75 watt light bulb, simple incandescent light bulb. 200 watts is the amount of energy that you consume when you're walking up a set of stairs. 1,000 watts, or a kilowatt, remember kilo means multiply by 1,000, is the amount of energy consumed by a typical household. Jumping up again, 25 kilowatts is a car engine. And that's kind of interesting to think that the rate of energy used by a car engine is 25 times higher than the rate of energy used by a household. And jumping up now to a megawatt, that means mega means multiplied by a million. That would be the energy contained in a lightning strike. A gigawatt, 10 to the 9 watts, is the energy produced by a nuclear power plant. And finally, 14 terawatts. So we've now jumped up from 10 to the 9 to 10 to the 12. 14 terawatts is the world energy consumption. So that just puts it really on a logarithmic scale to give us a feeling for just how much energy we're talking about. If we think about renewable energy resources, if we think about weaning ourselves off our dependence on fossil fuels, I've shown here the kinds of renewable energy that are available to us. So tides or oceans, hydroelectric, wind, geothermal, or biomass. And you look at the amount of energy that is available from each of those. Each of them is actually not enough to satisfy the world demand, except possibly geothermal, except only a small fraction of that is recoverable. But if we now consider solar, which has 120,000 terawatts arriving at the Earth's surface. And remember, our demand is 14 terawatts. So even if it's not practical to harness all that solar energy, it turns out it's probably practical to harness about 800 terawatts of solar energy. So if we compare that with 14 terawatts for the world demand, we can see that there's plenty of solar energy. There's more than enough to satisfy world demand. The big issue is that how do we sustainably and practically harness and convert that energy? Well, this is the thing that chemists are really good at. And if we think about the fossil fuels that we are most familiar with, most fuels use chemical bonds to store energy. And if we just think, for example, about gasoline, which is a simple hydrocarbon, when we burn it, we release this energy. So there's an equation there for the burning of octane, a simple hydrocarbon, with oxygen producing CO2 and water. And we know that delta H is over 5,000 kilojoules per mole exothermic. So we release that energy that was stored in the chemical bonds. Problem is, of course, that fossil fuels are a non-renewable resource, and the other problem with them is that it releases a lot of CO2 back into the atmosphere, and we know there are environmental problems associated with that. One of the really useful things about fossil fuels, alkanes, is that they have a very high energy density. So 60 mils of gasoline contains the same energy as a fully charged lead acid battery. So you think about a car battery, it's heavy and nasty to lug around, and just think about, quarter of a cup full of gasoline contains as much energy. Now, we use the energy of fossil fuels, energy contained in stored in chemical bonds, and plants use the same trick. Plants also store energy in chemical bonds. And here's just a schematic which shows how photosynthesis works. It's kind of a complicated diagram. There's a little bit of a key here that we have this light coming in, which is captured by this special pair. And what that does is it uses that energy to drive a chemical redox reaction that produces an electron and a hole. The hole goes to producing oxygen, and the electron goes to essentially making hydrogen, which is stored as NADPH. So there's the capture of light energy, making oxygen, making hydrogen. So it looks complicated, but it's actually really remarkable that it uses very simple chemistry not simple chemistry. It does all of this at room temperature and pressure under very mild conditions, and that's what we want to learn from. So can we copy plants? Can we use light energy to split water? So what we really want to do is take that very simple idea that we take water, we add some energy, we do the uphill reaction, which puts energy into the system. We would store it as the chemical bonds, essentially the chemical bonds in hydrogen, and then we recombine it when we want to release that energy, and that's very energetic. That's a downhill reaction. So we would recombine hydrogen and oxygen to release that energy. And the device that would do this is essentially a solar fuel cell. So we have a solar fuel cell, a device made of all kinds of interesting new materials developed by chemists. Sun shines on that, takes water, uses that energy to convert water. This is the uphill reaction into hydrogen and oxygen. We store the hydrogen, then we burn it to release the energy when required. So how much energy could we get out of this system? Well, if we take this reaction, water going to hydrogen and oxygen, that is uphill, endothermic, requires 237 kilojoules per mole. And if we were to figure out how much energy we could store based on a volume of water, converting a volume of water to hydrogen and oxygen, if we take this amount and convert it to joules per litre, we get about 1 million joules per litre. The Beijing Olympic pool, that famous water cube, contains a volume of about 1 million litres of water. So if we converted that 1 million litres of water to hydrogen and oxygen per second, that would give us 43 terawatts. So the power available in just an Olympic pool size amount of water would be more than twice as much as more than 3 times as much as what's required to power the world. So there's a lot of energy available from water. And yeah, so these are the challenges for chemists. So how are we going to make this practical and sustainable if we were to use sunlight energy to split water to produce hydrogen and then to be able to burn that hydrogen to generate energy? Well, we need a catalyst. If you think about it, the sun shines on oceans and lakes and rivers all the time, but oceans and lakes and rivers don't spontaneously convert into hydrogen and oxygen. So we need a catalyst, which can be a solid material or molecule. And it could be a solid oxide, it could be a molecular species like this, or we could learn from photosynthesis and look at the metal complex in photosynthesis. And so they can be solid materials, molecules, or biomolecules. And the chemist's challenge is to design and make a catalyst that will allow this reaction to happen sustainably and efficiently. The next challenge for chemists is hydrogen storage. Now, hydrogen is a gas. If we were to store it as a compressed gas, there's 2 problems with it. First of all, it's an explosion hazard. And secondly, the energy density is still too low. So we talked about energy densities before, but let's just have another look. So this is energy densities in megajoules per litre. So compressed hydrogen has an energy density of about 5.6 megajoules per litre. Gasoline has an energy density of about 34 megajoules per litre. And just to put that in context, a ham and cheese sandwich has an energy density of about 10 megajoules per litre. Ham and cheese sandwich just gets you a feeling for something that you can, how much energy is in a ham and cheese sandwich compared to gasoline or compressed hydrogen. But we can see that per litre, gasoline, a fossil fuel, contains way more energy than compressed hydrogen. So just simply compressing the gas costs a lot of energy to compress it, and it's also not practical. So what would be more practical? An example might be to store the hydrogen as solid hydrogen-containing materials. So a simple solid that is hydrogen rich and undergoes a simple process to release hydrogen when we want to use it, but can also be recharged, so can restore the hydrogen so you can cycle it around. So that's another challenge for chemists, is figuring out how to store that hydrogen. Even if you have hydrogen storage materials, though, there's still challenges to do with collecting it, recycling it, and reprocessing it. The next challenge is the hydrogen fuel cell, and this is the end of the process. We've converted water to hydrogen, we've stored it as perhaps a solid hydrogen-containing material, and then we need to combine the hydrogen and oxygen to produce energy. So this is kind of the opposite of the solar fuel cell. This is which is an energy storing fuel cell. This is an energy releasing fuel cell. And again, the reaction of hydrogen and oxygen together is explosive. If you've ever seen that experiment where somebody takes a balloon full of hydrogen and lights it and it goes up in a bang. Now that releases a lot of energy, but not in a way that is very usable. So in order to do that same reaction, we need to be able to do it in a super controlled way that releases the energy in a form that's usable and in a form that we can control it. And so to do that, you need a whole lot of other new materials. You need electrodes, because these are redox reactions. You need membranes to separate the cells, and also you need a catalyst. So more new materials with tailored properties. So really thinking about just this little sustainability story, if we were to bring to bear the skills of a whole bunch of chemists, and that will be you folk in the future, to solve some of these sustainability problems, we need to think about what skills chemists need. And so there's really just a summary here of different branches of chemistry, and I won't read them all out, but all of them are useful and important when you come to use your skills as a chemist of the future to solve these problems. Now, why have I picked this particular set of skills? I've picked this set of skills because these are the research areas that the Research School of Chemistry at the ANU are specialists in. And so we have this collection of skills in our school ready and waiting to induct you into them as a chemistry student. And the important thing is that you are the chemists who will meet these challenges in the future. So if you're to study in the Research School of Chemistry, the expert researchers that are experts in all of these areas of chemistry are the same people that teach our courses. We have an award-winning first-year chemistry program, and it's carried out in new buildings and labs. It's really a shame that you're not able to be here at ANU present in person today to look around our beautiful building and labs, but we still hope that we can welcome you in person in the future, and we look forward to seeing you. The next step is that my colleague, Dr. Tristan Reiki, will give you a little bit more detailed information about the chemistry program and studying chemistry. Thanks very much.